one or the other of the things. Whichever, I will cut the feed to YouTube. Because the Facebook group is what I'm here for. Nobody has joined yet. All right, the first question, as usual, is YouTube people, are you getting a good feed of me? Do I look like I'm moving and also making noises from my face? And same question to the YouTube people. Am I coming through? Is things working? Is it all kosher? Is it okay to say kosher? I don't know. With racial sensitivity these days, it's hard to tell. Stan says, looking good. Thank you, Stan. Am I getting... Is there actual video coming through? Because I can't see it on my end. All I can see is like every 5 seconds I get a different frame. According to this, I am uploading at 5 to 6 megabits. So something's going out. I've got 2 separate streams going out. YouTube people says, noise is coming out of my face. That's good. Actual videos coming through. Thank you, Slacker999999. All right, so if everybody's here, well, let's start asking questions, and I will start answering them, or at least responding to them. James gives me a thumbs up. That's great. James Cassandra. That may be James or Cassandra. Don't know which. Well, before anybody gets any questions, let me just give you a quick background of how the Treatment-Free Beekeepers Facebook group came to be. For those of you watching on YouTube, this broadcast is for the Treatment-Free Beekeepers Facebook group. If you want to go join that group, you can get into that. I'll be standing by right here, possibly letting people in on the fly, so you can get into there if you want to. But the whole idea behind the Treatment-Free Beekeepers Facebook group is that, what was it, about 2011, I was starting to become disenchanted with the availability of chat for treatment-free beekeepers, because so often the groups, the internet forums were having so many problems with treatment-free beekeepers because there weren't really any rules against coming in and just trashing treatment-free beekeepers. There's no place for treatment-free beekeepers just to talk as treatment-free beekeepers without needing to defend their case all the time. And there was becoming enough of us that I figured, why should we have to defend this anymore? We should have a space where we can just be who we are, like, you know, like in a vegan Facebook group. It's pretty well against the rules to come in and try and convince people to eat meat. So that's basically the idea behind the Treatment-Free Beekeepers Facebook group. Is it's a place for treatment-free beekeepers to talk about beekeeping without having to listen to all the nonsense about treating. And if treating beekeepers want to come and join and learn how that's done and listen instead of offer their opinions on the matter, then they are always welcome to do that, to be learners from those of us who've been successful for a number of years. Stan Gore asks, is sugar water considered a treatment? Not generally. Sugar syrup can be considered a treatment in the sense that if you feed a hive that isn't surviving on its own, you're sort of treating against starvation, which we would be against, I guess you would say. But there's a lot of cases, especially for new beekeepers, when they're ordering packages or catching swarms or trying to get that less than optimal hive to survive the first winter, where we are not too down on that. We want beekeepers to be able to get through that step. But what we don't want is people to feed their bees like rabbits. Rabbits are in a cage. They can't get out and eat for themselves, and so you have to feed them everything. And bees are not like that. The whole purpose of bees is for them to get honey or get nectar from out there and to bring it here, and then we keep it. So if they can't do that, then they really deserve to just shuffle off the mortal coil, which is it's rough, but considering that our whole movement is based around natural selection, you're going to have things die. And so what we're seeking is not a 0% loss rate. It's a low sustainable loss rate. It's optimal for us would be basically identical to whatever the local loss rate in your area is. You'll probably do a little better than the local loss rate because you'll be able to requeen hives when they need it, whereas the local feral bees might not be able to do that. But the idea is that we want a low sustainable loss rate so that every year we are losing the worst of the worst colonies. Billy asks, when is the next podcast? Well, I was planning on posting some of these Q&As as podcasts. I haven't been able to get any guests lately, and so I've been having trouble putting podcasts together. I have recorded a few more videos that of like little vignettes, 10, 15-minute videos that I want to post as podcasts. But yes, I know I'm working on it. I've been doing videos instead. I've also been working a lot, so I've been trying to do everything together, and I'm also starting to do more of these live Q&Rs. So that's where this came from. The idea for this one a week ago came from there's a local beekeeping event with my local beekeeping association, which is hostile to treatment-free beekeeping. So I thought, or somebody told me, I don't know if it was an original idea, but somebody told me, hey, instead of going to that thing, why don't you sit down and record something? So I said, sure. So I did a live Q&R, which is what I'm doing now. So I'm going to try and do them maybe every Monday night. We'll see how it goes. All right. Do we have any questions from YouTube? Slacker says, where can I get treatment-free queens? I would say the best place to get treatment-free queens is from your local friendly neighborhood beekeeper who's treatment-free already. Other than that, the only way is to really, as I recommend people only go with local bees and not ship bees in from foreign places. Catch swarms and hive them and keep them, and when they survive for a year or two and they don't need treatment, then they will be treatment-free queens for you. If they don't survive, well, then try again, because swarms are free. William James asks, what about intermittent feeding like the flowers? The problem with feeding comes in where, like I said with rabbits, when people are feeding them just as a matter of course, like every day, like you feed your dog. I'm really in an established hive. I don't think it should need to be fed at all. If you are just starting out and you've got a few hives and you need to make sure they all make it through the winter so that you can have something to work with through the next year, then feed them if they need it. But things like stimulative feeding in the spring to get them to brood up early, that's not good. You want them to become adapted to your local area so that they brood up at the right time without intervention. When you do that intervention, you remove the selective pressure for them to do the job themselves. Carrie or Kari asks, how to deal with ants on hives without chemicals? Chemicals. Well, depends on what you mean by chemicals, but I'm assuming you mean like toxic pesticides and things. So one of the common things that people do is they will create some sort of either like a jar that holds the legs of the hive stand, something to isolate the legs so that ants can't climb up in there, and then fill it with water. Other people have filled it with other chemicals, which I'm not excited about, but people do that. Also, I've heard of people smearing Vaseline on the legs of the hives. Another thing you can do is make sure to close down the entrances of your hives so that they are more easily defendable. And if you want to use something to kill the ants, there are some more or less, what would you say, natural chemicals that people use. Borax, those little ant baits that you buy in the store, some of them have borax, which is a naturally occurring, I think it's a salt, but it's a naturally occurring chemical, and it kills ants, and they put it in sugar syrup, and the ants take it back and kills the hive. So you can do that. Or I've taken just powdered borax, which people use for roaches, and squirted in the ant nest. There's a few ideas. I've tended to ignore the ant problem. I guess I just want my bees to deal with it themselves, whatever they're doing. Would it help to hang a hive from a tripod, hive beetles and ants? Suspending it in the air wouldn't be a bad idea. The problem comes in if the hive can swing around in the wind. Bees don't like that very much. They want to, their native habitat is a tree hollow, so they want to be more or less still. So they might not like it if the hive is swinging around in the air. Man, my voice is dry today. We just had summer's really kicking in here. If you hear any, a minute ago, there's a big shadow came over. We have a big forest fire just down to the south of us here. I'm looking out the window to the south. And it's called the Klamathon Fire. You can look it up online. I'm sure you can find a map. Anyway, they've got fire bombers cruising back and forth over here today and yesterday and perhaps the day before. I don't know. I wasn't here. But I think the biggest fire bomber in the world is a converted, retired DC-10 airliner, big airplane, DC-10. So that thing flies over every 2 hours or so. It's fun to watch. I like airplanes. And my house here is just off the flight path as the planes are coming in on their final approach to the airport. So I get to see those all the time. Texas Oak says, thank you for all your podcasts from Texas. Caught 11 swarms this year. You're really making a difference. Thank you. I'm glad you're catching swarms. It's a lot of fun. Our swarming season here has been a bit weak. I've only caught 4 swarms so far. So, could have done better. I haven't collected all my swarm traps yet, so there may be more. But I'm just talking about the ones here. All right, let's go back over to Facebook. Get some more questions. Branch asks, I have a swarm I hived on June 14th. They drew queen cups and capped them. I checked to see that the virgin hatched. She did. Clear chewed open queen cups and destroyed the other queen cells. Here's the question. It has been nearly 30 days since the queen cells were drawn. I should be seeing eggs by now, but I am not. Should I be considering adding my mated queen to this hive or give it more time? You should be seeing eggs by now, but there's a possibility you won't. I would recommend, if you have any queen problems, that includes queenlessness or laying workers, just add a frame or top bar, as the case may be, of open brood from another hive, and at the very worst, they will draw another queen. So, and you don't just stop with one. Do that once a week until you have a laying queen again. That is the cure-all for queen problems. Unless you have a bad queen who's not being deposed, in which case you can smush her and do the same thing. Carolyn asks, is there a ratio of honey to hive I should leave for the bees as summer ends and going into winter? Should I take off the queen excluder when the honey season ends? I would recommend it. I personally don't use queen excluders. I use a method called unlimited brood nest, and that's where basically you just don't use a queen excluder, and you can use a layer of capped honey in the hive as a queen excluder. And so the part of the problem with queen excluders is that the bees don't necessarily want to go through them, and so they can be called honey excluders, and you might get your brood nest bound up in honey. Really, the only reason for anybody to use a queen excluder is if you are a commercial beekeeper and you want to be able to harvest honey by the box without having to look through the box. If that is not what you do, then you do not need a queen excluder. If you harvest honey frame by frame by hand, you do not need a queen excluder. You can just take the honey on individual frames and not worry about it. You should leave. Now, I can't tell you exactly how much honey you should leave on your hive for winter because different areas require different amounts. For instance, here in Oregon, I can get by with a single deep nuc, like 10 frame nuc. Will, if it's reasonably full of honey, will survive the winter with no problem and even have some left over. However, there are definitely areas in the world which require a lot more honey than that to survive. So you should talk to your local beekeepers, beekeeping friends and mentors and things, and ask them how much honey bees need to survive in your area, and then give a healthy fudge factor on top of that. Anne says, hello. Hello, Anne. How are you doing today? I'm doing fine. Aurora asks, do you allow your hives to swarm and then try to catch them, or do you split? I do all of the above. I don't generally try to stop swarming. If I do, I don't over inspect my hives, so a lot of times swarms will happen when I'm not around without even seeing queen cells. I'll see the queen cells after they've hatched, after the swarm has already left. I do set up swarm traps around. I don't generally actively try to catch swarms just because I'm out busy doing other things and may not have time to go on swarm calls. So I like to put up a lot of swarm traps. I also do splits. I used to do walk-away splits, which is where you just take the hive and divide it up and separate it out into 2 or sometimes 3 or 4 pieces for each hive to make a new queen on their own. However, I have graduated to rearing queens by grafting and then making nucleus hives and then growing the nucleus hives from 3 frames up to hopefully 10 frames before winter. So I do all that. James asks, any tips to get comb drawn after the main flow? Don't even bother. If they're not interested in storing honey, all they're going to do is eat your foundation. So there's one of those things that's one of those things that I just say that's for commercial beekeepers to do. Our bees, if they've got enough space, if they're not filling up the space, just leave them be. Leave them alone. After the main flow, let them reduce their brood nest size. Going through summer, maybe pick up a little extra honey toward the fall flow if you have one. But I mean, they're not going to draw comb after the main flow, and that's just a matter of you trying to get them to do something that they have no interest in doing and have no reason to do. So I don't see that we should try and do that. Billy asks, are there any restrictions on keeping bees in Northern California? We will probably be moving to Redding, California, possibly your area. It depends on the city. Those are always city issues. There are a few state issues. California, I believe, is more restrictive. Oregon doesn't have an active beekeeping program. I believe it was repealed or something intended to be replaced at some point, but was never replaced. So I'm not really concerned about it. I would, if I were you, I would look up the rules in Redding, California. It shouldn't be too hard to find with anybody who's familiar with using the internet. If you're not familiar with using the internet, ask one of your children or one of your neighbor's children, and I'm sure they can help you out. But yeah, it depends on the city. Most cities these days, there have been a lot of pro beekeeping ordinances passed, at least to the matter where you can have a couple of hives. In Medford, for instance, where I am, I believe it's 2 hives per property. Some cities it's based on the size of your property, and there might be some regulations on breaks and things so that bees aren't the active flight path isn't across somebody's back porch. I mean, that's just being a good neighbor. All right, back to YouTube questions. Texas Oaks asks, have you heard of people using top bar supers? I have heard of people using top bar supers. And there, I believe if you do some searching around on the internet, you will be able to find some examples of people doing that. That is possible. I have done long laying hives, which is where you take you build a normal style Langstroth hive, only instead of making it 10 frames, you make it 20 or 30 or 40 or however long you want, so that it's all on a single level. And those, of course, are much easier to do supers on, because then you just take off part of your lid if you've got sectional lid and you stack supers on it. And I've done that before. I personally haven't done top bar hives, but yes, people can do top bar supers. And I have also seen when I did the interview with Ruby Bloom, who lives up in Merlin, which is northwest of here. She had built, was it her? I think it was her. She had built an adapter that allowed her to use a top bar hive and then be able to grow a 5-frame nuke into a top bar hive. So it was an adapter of a kind of a nuke box that sits on the end of a top bar hive. So that would be another way to do it. That'd be interesting. Eric asks, in your opinion, is walkaway queens good as grafted? Generally, yes. If queens are of poor quality, then they'll remake them. So generally, if you've got a healthy hive and you do a walkaway split, the queen's going to be of at least average quality. Or I guess average quality would be technically correct. But if she's not, if she's still capable of laying, then they will supersede her reasonably quickly. And then you'll have another queen, and that's just part of the process. If she's not capable of laying, if something goes wrong, then again, you're going to want to add a frame of open brood to the hive once a week until the queen is properly replaced. So whatever hive you did that walkaway split with, the other hive that still has the active queen, you can keep adding brood over. And that'll help boost your worker population in a hive with no laying queen. And the pheromones from that frame will suppress laying workers. So once a week, frame of open brood fixes all queen problems. Stonerman 2K asks, what do you think of the VSH queens and breeders? Should we go that route or focus on localization of bees? I believe we should focus on localization of bees. What I try to do is be interactive with my local feral population. So that means I catch swarms from the feral population. I also don't try to prohibit too many swarms from leaving and going back to the feral population. Therefore, my bees are functionally the same as the feral population overall. And the reason why I'm not too big into the VSH and the what are some other good ones? The Minnesota Hygienics and Mite Biters and Mite Maulers and all those other ones is because when you When you overbreed for a certain trait, for a certain single trait, you lose other beneficial traits. You don't focus on the right things, and you end up getting something that really only kind of works. You know, Michael Bush uses the example of draft horses who, for hundreds of years, were bred for their pulling ability because that's what they were meant to do. So over hundreds of years, you breed a horse for a pulling ability, you get a horse that looks like a draft horse. So along comes the automobile and tractors and things, and you no longer need a horse with pulling ability, and so you breed horses that look like a draft horse. The problem is those horses have lost their pulling ability. They just look like draft horses now. They're not high-performance pulling horses anymore. The same thing with bees. If you breed for a single trait, you're going to lose other traits. And it is my firm contention that the mite and disease problems that we have with bees are multi-trait issues. So VSH isn't going to do it. Hygienic behavior isn't going to do it. You need a selection of traits that is chosen naturally and automatically by the bees through the processes of natural selection that will deal with the problem as a living in a universe of issues, any one of which may be able to be solved by a single trait, but none of which exist on their own. It all exists as a whole, and so we should deal with it as a whole. And other problems you get with bringing in queens from other areas is a lot of times you'll have crossbreeding problems. The daughter of that queen you brought in might be mean just because of crossbreeding, which is sort of the same way that Africanized bees happens. But yeah, I'm definitely focus on your local bee population and your beekeeping friends, and develop your local. And some clubs are really good at this. I think probably the best example that I've seen so far is the Sonoma. I don't know what their official Sonoma County, Sonoma Beekeepers, something. Sonoma, the group that I went down to visit last month. They have an excellent program spreading the bees around, both swarms and splits and things. So if you don't live in their area, maybe check out their website and see what they're up to. Where else can I send in questions? Are you in a Discord chat or something? The other place that you're going to want to send in questions is join the Treatment-Free Beekeepers Facebook group. You should be able to find that fairly easily on Facebook. In fact, why don't I just post a link to it here really quick. Let me get one. Facebook.com/groups/treatment-free beekeepers. Posting link on YouTube. There it is. So I'm not the only, the group isn't about me, and I try to make it as little about me as possible. It's about treatment-free beekeepers. It's for treatment-free beekeepers. I try to stay out of it as much as I can because I don't want it to be about me. I have no interest in being famous whatsoever. So if you go and join the group and ask questions, you will have many people who will be able to answer those questions for you. And you'll get many different answers, and you can decide for yourself which one's the best one. We have, as of this moment, 29,150 members. And last time I checked the group insights, well, let's see, I'll check it right now. See how many active members there are. Oh, my computer's running a little bit slow with all this video uploading going on. Apparently we have 17.4 thousand posts, comments, and reactions in the last 28 days. With a total of 17.7 thousand active members. And I don't think there are necessarily that many active members posting in the group. That's just how many active how many people active on Facebook are in the group. So that's good too. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I never expected that it would get this big. It's only been going for 5 years, and it's one of the biggest beekeeping groups on Facebook. So it's been really good. Stonerman2K asks, let's see. Love your podcasts. Any suggestions on what we can do to keep our bees from visiting our neighbors' pools? I would say the best thing to do is before your neighbor's pool is open in the spring to set up some sort of watering area for your bees so that early in the spring they get accustomed to going to that spot. A good thing to have would be like a bird feeder full of like river rocks or something, or one of the ones that a lot of people uses is wine corks. And you don't necessarily want clean water, like you don't want fresh tap water necessarily. Bees actually kind of prefer funky water. There's been a lot of hypotheses as to why that is, but one of the popular ones I think is that they're able to smell it better. It has a sort of flavor that they can come back to it's consistent. They're not really drinking it, so that doesn't matter. They're just taking it back to spread around the hive and cool the hive with. But yes, pools can be a problem. They can annoy your neighbors. I have had to move my bees before because of a neighbor with a pool. So yeah, that happens. Fairhurst Apiary and Honey Farm says, "Hi all, I'm new to your channel." Welcome, Fairhurst. Good to hear from you. If you haven't already, join the Treatment-Free Beekeepers Facebook group, which I just posted a link to. All right, back to Facebook questions. Ooh, we got a couple built up here. I'm not keeping after it, am I? Where was I? Deborah. Have you ever overwintered just a couple nucs? Everything I've seen about wintering nucs has been large numbers of them. I have not wintered anything smaller than a 10-frame nuc. So I am not the expert on that. A really good source of information for that would be Adrian Quiney in Wisconsin. There's a few videos of him around YouTube you can find. Also, good people to talk about are, let's see, Kirk Webster is a good overwintering nuc person, but he's a commercial beekeeper with a lot of nucs, so that may not answer your questions. Lori asks, "Hi, are you not seeing Facebook comments?" I am seeing them. I'm just going back and forth between Facebook and YouTube comments. So I'll get to your questions. Don't worry. I'm still here. I'll be here for another hour, so hang in there. I'll get there. Let's see. Who else is good for overwintering nucs? There's a couple of people who are into that. I'm forgetting names right now. But yeah, check YouTube. There are videos about it. Adrian Quiney's good. Kirk Webster. There's people that I've interviewed on the podcast too. I can't remember. What is his name? Clay? I don't remember. But yeah, the information is out there. Yes. Lori asks, "What's your advice on cast swarms?" On cast swarms, which I'm assuming what you mean is secondary swarms. After the primary swarm, you'll have secondary swarms that often have virgin queens, maybe even multiple virgin queens in the swarm, and the swarm will generally be smaller than the primary swarm. I believe that's what you mean by cast swarms. And my advice would be to catch them and feed them, because they're going to need some help if they're small swarms. If you have locally well-adapted local bees, cast swarms either won't be a problem or they will, if they do exist, they should be more more viable. See, in a northern area, a small late swarm is not going to be viable, and so what's the point of wasting all that much, all that energy producing a swarm that's just going to die? So our more cooler adapted bees are not going to do that as much. More warmer adapted bees that are adapted for smaller hives are going to have more cast swarms because those swarms are going to be more viable. There's actually a purpose in sending them out like that. So if you do have cast swarms, you're going to want to feed them to get ready for winter. Depending on where you're located, this doesn't really tell me where you are, does it? No, it doesn't. And what are best books for new beekeepers that are treatment-free, or what basic beekeeping books have relatively good info? I need to learn more. I don't understand nucs, splits, etc. Books. Probably one of the best books, the best specifically treatment-free beekeeping book would be the Complete Idiot's Guide to Beekeeping, which is written by Dean Stiglitz and Lori Herboldsheimer. And they are treatment-free, but it's not, I'm not sure if it's a comprehensive book. It's been a while since I read it. I have it around here somewhere. What I would recommend is, if you want to learn about splits and nucs a little bit, check out my website, parkerbees.com. Check out Michael Bush's website, which is bushfarms.com. Mine's Parker Bees, his is Bush Farms. And I think it's /bees on his. But the bushfarms.com will take you there, and then you can choose the bees section. Because he also does horses. Lori asks, feed with what? The only thing I ever feed with, I try to do 3 to 2 sugar syrup. So what I do is I take a 25-pound bag of sugar, I dump it in a 5-gallon bucket, and I add 2 gallons of hot water. I mix it up, let it sit for a while, and then feed with it. I don't feed a lot. I've fed a grand total of 1 small swarm, this one I'm looking out the window at right now. Because when it came in, it was like that big. Very small swarm. And it has perked up and is doing well, it seems. I need to inspect it, see how it's doing. If you're going to be feeding getting toward fall, after September, I would say, you should not feed syrup after September because you will start to have moisture issues. As you know from basic bee biology, bees bring in nectar, they concentrate it down, they evaporate the water off, it turns into honey, they add some other things too. They cap it over and they store it. If that process doesn't get finished by the time it gets cold, that honey can't be capped because they can't evaporate enough water out of it, and it will ferment, and it will start attracting water, and you'll have moisture issues in your hive in winter. So if you're going to do that, look into dry sugar feeding. That's the only kind of feeding that you can do in winter for a very small hive. And as I said before, feeding should be a stopgap measure. It should not be a regular thing. So it's for working with specific hives on specific issues on a temporary basis. Let's see. Lori says she's in Pacific Northwest Maritime area. I'm guessing, I don't know what that means exactly. Is that Portland, Seattle? There's some good groups in Portland and Seattle, so check out your local groups if you can. How long does it take for a package queen to start laying? She should start laying easily within 2 weeks. It depends. If she's really good, she should start laying almost as soon as she's released from the cage. But she may take a little longer. If it's more than 2 weeks, then you can start working on alternate options. like I said, the best solution for queen problem is adding a frame of open brood once a week, just as long as it takes. Lori says, I have not fed before, so I'll have to learn more about how much, how long, etc. Yes, and that is one of those location-specific things. So I can't tell you exactly when to stop feeding in syrup. Yeah, just listen to the stuff I said before. Andrew says, hello from Adelaide, South Australia. Hello, Andrew. Welcome to the Aussies. Aussies? And also Kiwis, if there's any Kiwis. I want to go visit down there. Never had the opportunity. All right, back to YouTube. Stonerman2K asks, what do you think of open feeding? Definitely a no-no on the open feeding. That's a good way to start robbing problems and to alert the other bees in your area of where your hives are. So don't do that if you can. Bob says, good evening from Belgium. Welcome, Bob. I guess it's pretty late in the evening for you there. It's got to be after midnight, right? Mimi says, what is your best way to reduce the count of small hive beetles in your colonies? I personally have not had problems with small hive beetles. I did have them in Arkansas when I lived there. I have not seen, I rarely see hive beetles here. They are here, but very rarely. So I'm not very good on hive beetles. Hive beetles I tend to think of as the same in terms of the other stuff, which is let it ride, let the bees take care of it. That may not be a good option for you. I can't speak to that necessarily. But my solution for everything is to split your hives and get as many as you can so that when they die, you have others to replace them. Bob says, 2 in the morning, but I'm on night shifts. Well, thank you, Bob, for showing up. Glad you could be here. I tried to pick a good time for everybody that was good. So here, 4:30, I'm 4:30 on the West Coast, so I was figuring people should be getting home from work. Maybe they'll log on and see me. But most of the population of beekeepers in the U.S. is in the eastern half of the country. So those people will be in the evening. One of my moderators said he wasn't going to be able to make it because it's midnight in Ireland, I think is where he is. Scotland? Anyway, wherever he's from. Stonerman's talking about Swiffer cloths and oil traps. Again, I know nothing about those things, so I'm not comfortable giving advice on things I have not done personally myself. You guys can chat about that. I'm going to go back over to Facebook. Where were we? Andrew asks, I have a lot of bees around the hive, dead on the concrete path. Is this due to pesticides? Do you think it would be due to the age of the bees just naturally passing away? If you have a lot of bees laying on the ground, I generally find that to be one of two problems. Number one would be a pesticide kill, a pesticide problem somewhere in your neighborhood or nearby that the bees picked up and brought home. See, normally most bees are going to die away from the hive, right? The vast majority of bees are going to die out in the field somewhere, flying around and, just end up on the ground somewhere. If you have there are always going to be a few bees in front of your hive that are dead, because some will die in the hive, or you'll have a nearly adult larvae who die and will need to be hauled out. But if you've got a pile of bees and a lot of bees spreading around, that's either going to be pesticides or it could be a robbing issue where you have bees coming in and robbing and getting in fights with guard bees, and either the robbers and or the guard bees getting killed and ending up on the front porch of the hive. I have a hive in my yard right now, which has just died and was robbed out, and there's a big pile of bees in front of it. So that does happen. And I've seen, after major robbing events, major piles of bees on the front of the hive. Robert says, hi from Bradenton, Florida. Welcome. All right, that's all the Facebook questions right now. Let's go back to YouTube, see if we have anything. Bob asks, how can I best move a populated hive with 2 deeps and 2 supers? The stack is too high to fit in my car. That's rough. Borrow a pickup. Yeah. Or Stoner Man says, Bob, split and duct tape, which is a possibility. You want to make sure that you don't have that they have enough ventilation. So you might want to duct tape some screen over them rather than just duct tape them completely closed. But yeah, you can split them up, move them, put them back together. You're probably going to want to keep a suit on throughout the entire issue. We're in a dearth, though, he says. That's, yeah. If you can wait. Oh, no eggs in there also. Well, you might have other problems with the hive. Can you strap it on the roof? Or one of those little cargo carriers that you can put on a hitch. I moved 4 hives just this past Sunday night. Yeah, it was a week ago. Before I recorded last week's live stream. And so I just picked the hives up. They were not too heavy, but some of them were pretty big. Picked them up, put them on. I have a flatbed truck that I use for work and used that. If you can borrow, I mean, I'm always into community things. So if you can borrow something from your neighbor, your friend, pickup or a cargo rack or something, small trailer. My bee truck is a 4x8 trailer that I built back in 2008 when I moved my bees from Oregon to Arkansas. And I pull that behind my Toyota Corolla. So I like that. It's small because the big truck gets like 12 miles to the gallon. Bob says, might be able to borrow a pickup from the guy that lets me put bees on his land. It's a good idea if he has one. But yeah, the main thing when you're moving bees, if you're confining bees at all, is to make sure to give them enough ventilation. They can't have too much ventilation. Ventilation is very important because lots of small insects use a lot of oxygen. You would be surprised how much oxygen they use. All right, back to Facebook. Frank says, hi from Colbrand, Colorado. I'm not familiar with where that is. I was in Colorado just, when was it? Last month? I was down in north of Albuquerque for a retreat. And on my way back, I drove through the southwest corner of Colorado, through Durango, which I had actually been to before. Durango-Silverton Railway is amazing. If you ever get the opportunity to do the Durango-Silverton Railway, definitely do it. All right, where are we back to? Just gotta check my Facebook messages and such here. Frank says it's near Grand Junction on the Grand Mesa. Okay, I have been in that area. My great-grandfather is buried in where was that? I'm gonna have to look it up now. My grandfather on my dad's side was from Colorado. My grandmother was born and raised in Wyoming. children. No, that's okay. See, yeah, there's Grand Junction. Ah, yes. My great-grandfather is buried in Cedar Edge, which is not too far from Grand Junction. I took a motorcycle trip over there when I lived in Colorado. All right, more questions. Bob says he bought the hive off a guy who grew an allergy. Yeah, that's a bummer. I've always been concerned that that would happen, but I work bees without gloves, so I get stung fairly often. I estimate probably 100 or 200 times a year, and I have not been allergic. In fact, most of the year it doesn't even swell up. The first couple times a year it'll swell up. Bob says he's only on episode 55. Catching it. Oh, that's a different podcast. That's fine. I'm not. Just so everybody knows, I'm not in competition, so you'll hear me recommend other people's websites. You can listen to other people's podcasts. I'm not at all concerned about being in competition with anybody else. If my rule is, if you don't like my stuff, then go like somebody else's stuff. It really doesn't bother me. Fairhurst Apiary says, how do you treat stings? Personally, I don't treat stings. I just scrape the stinger off and go about my business. I have tried the, what's that called? It's a little weed that you can find growing around, and you chew up the leaves. I know somebody will post the name of the little weed. It's the same as the other name for a banana type plant, if I remember correctly. What was that called? Anyway, if you Google it, you can find. I just chewed up the plant leaf and put that on my children's bee sting. Plantain, that's the right one. Thank you. And that seemed to work. I'm not sure if it's a placebo effect, but it worked pretty well. It doesn't taste great, but, if you've got a screaming child, whatever works, right? Yeah, Bob says, think the stinger doesn't always go in deep. Yes, that's true. The longer you leave a stinger in, it will continue to work its way in. It kind of pulses and pushes the stinger further into the skin and pumps more venom in there. And so the stinger will get progressively worse. More venom pumped in deeper over the course of about 5 to 10 minutes. So if any of you have ever done bee sting therapy, which I have, I once in a while have sore joints. I broke this finger in January, so I've done a little bit on that one. This joint gets sore once in a while. Did that one, and it's worked. I mean, it seemed to have worked pretty well. This one probably needs some more again. It's still a little stiff, and it's not quite as straight as it used to be. And it used to be even straighter until I cut it off with a lawnmower. So you can see it's slightly shorter than the other one. That's the length. You can see the difference in length. Because when I was 13, I cut it off with a lawnmower right here, and it cut right through the growth plate. And so when they sewed it back on, it never grew after that. So that was funny. Yes. Let's see. Bob says, got stung on the nose once, no effect apart from tingling sensation. You got really fortunate, because getting stung on the nose really hurts. Like whenever I get stung on the nose, it's like, eye-watering painful. Fairhurst Honey Farm says, usually I'm very sore than itchy. I just got stung in the brow and my whole face swole up. That does happen. I do my best not to get stung in the face. Don't mind get stung in the hands, but I do not want to get stung in the face. Seems we've gotten a conversation started on Facebook about getting stung different places. I got a good one for you. When I was a kid, I was walking by my grandparents' greenhouse where they grew flowers, and there was a Yellowjacket nest, and it had grown, I'm going to say, over a foot high. And we're talking about a pretty good Yellowjacket nest. And so I was wandering around there. I was probably farting around too close to the nest. Yellowjackets are jerks. So one came out and stung me right in the eye. And so I ran off and cried and, did the usual stuff. And then I was walking by the next day, just walking by, was not doing anything, was minding my own business. I was probably 20 feet away from the hive. And I got stung in the other eye. So there's no moral to that story. Just that happened. I ended up destroying the nest. So took care of that problem. Let's see, Lori said, I'm back to Facebook now. Lori says, thanks for your advice. We'll start feeding, but we'll have to look at books to figure. Thanks for the recipe. We have 2 cast swarms from May. Good. More swarms, the better. How do you know how much space your bees need, i.e. when to add another box? When they're mostly full with the bottom box and you've still got a nectar flow going on, that's a good time to add another box. And don't just add another box. Take part of the brood nest and put it up in that next box so that they don't necessarily like to travel vertically between gaps, but they'll travel horizontally much easier. So if you take frames and put up there, last time I explained something called pyramiding up. If you take 10 frames that are full in the bottom, you leave 4 frames in the bottom box, 4 frames in the second box, 2 frames in the third box. That's called pyramiding up, and then the bees will spread out from that in a much more rapid fashion than trying to move vertically. Robert says the hive has no queen, no eggs, but has bees. So that's probably you have a laying worker situation. So what you're going to want to do there is add. You're not going to be able to add a queen. They'll probably kill her. You'll want to add a frame or 2 of brood every week on a schedule until they start making a new queen. It might take several weeks because the first thing you'll have to do is suppress the laying workers before they will decide to make another queen. Paul says, my dad was a beekeeper for 35 years and had a bad reaction once. Always carry epinephrine pen in the truck just in case. I have an EpiPen somewhere here, don't I? I never carry it with me because I've never had a problem, but I probably should. Yeah, here we go. When do these expire? Replace when solution is discolored. What's color is it supposed to be? It's clear-ish. Is there an expiration date? Seriously, what? Like, discolored from what? Do not refrigerate. Protect from light. Contains no latex. Well, that's handy. Oh, here's an expiration date. Expires August 16. Whoops. Well, that was 2 years ago, wasn't it? Well, that's good to know. Those are expired. But we don't know if they're discolored or not. So I'm going to keep them. Robert Kinney, do you mint? I have not used mint. I'm not sure what you're talking about there, but no, whatever mint is, I don't. Lori asks, can bees handle pyramiding if I have empty frames, no foundation or comb? I don't know how much wax they can make. If you're doing foundationless, I would recommend only doing that in putting single frames between other frames of already drawn comb, just to keep everything straight. Otherwise, you're gonna want to keep very close track on how they're building comb in there, because oftentimes they will build it diagonally across your frames. There was, in fact, just a post on the Facebook group just this last week about that, where somebody had that happen and had to cut everything out. So check out that post. It's a good post. Allison says the liquid should be clear. I mean, it's mostly clear, I think. Maybe it might be a slight tan color, but I don't know if that's the color of the plastic or anyway. It's not green, so that's good, right? Barbara asks, where do you get an EpiPen and how much do they cost? I got these from when we were in Colorado. We had good health insurance through Kaiser Permanente, and I think they only cost us like $4 or $8 with the copay. So yeah, from a doctor. If you go to your normal doctor and say, hey, I'm a beekeeper, I think it's a really good idea that you give me an EpiPen. And I've never heard of anybody turning down an EpiPen because they're easy. The question is how much they cost. That would be the question. And that'll be different for each person. There has been in the news lately of EpiPen prices going up. But Allison says the epinephrine solution should be clear. If the epinephrine solution is discolored, pinkish or brown color, or contains solid particles, speak with your healthcare professional immediately and replace your EpiPen or their authorized generics. Is it brown? I would not say brown. Like, I can't tell if it's an actual color or if it's just the color of the, because it's surrounded by yellow plastic, right? So if I'm looking through the color, I mean, it doesn't look like it's any color at all. It looks clear and colorless. There's no solids of any sort floating around. It looks clear, maybe slightly affected by the color of the light that's surrounding it. That's my guess. All right, back to YouTube. See, Starman, speaking of Yellowjackets, do you trap or anything? Suggestions on control. The best time to trap, it's almost worthless to trap beyond this time of year. The best time to trap is in the early spring when you'll have the queens that are coming out and making the new hives. The queens, unlike honeybees where you need the entire colony of bees to make the hive, in Yellowjackets and hornets and things, the queen overwinters by herself. She hibernates somewhere, and then she builds the entire new nest the next year. So if you can catch the queens at that time, that's the best time. Or you can go yellowjacket hunting, which is less fun than it sounds. But if you've got a good, solid bee suit, I mean, what are they going to do to you? Bob says, I saw 2 of them eat some of my weaker bees. Yes, you will have, if you have bad enough yellowjacket problems, they will go after honeybees. That is an issue. He also wants to know if you should trap. It's kind of pointless to trap. Wherever you put the trap, they're just going to be drawn to by the smell. So if you put a trap next to your hive, they're just going to be drawn there. So that's not necessarily a good thing. If you do know where the nearby hives are and you want to get rid of those, that's an option. That being said, little paper wasps, like the ones with open comb in their nests, they're not a danger. They don't bother anybody. They're not even vicious. Same with types of mud daubers and other small paper wasps and things. They're not generally an issue. It's just the yellowjackets with the enclosed nests. Yellowjackets and bald-faced hornets, which are not actually hornets. They're actually wasps, but they're called bald-faced hornets. Fairhurst Apiary says, I bought a nuke and transferred it to a new hive. The comb is all dark brown and gross. What can I do about that and when? Just if you want to, as the hive builds out new frames of comb, you can take new frames and stick them one by one. I mean, like, one every 2 weeks or something in between those other frames. And as they are built out, you can slowly, by putting new ones in the middle, move those frames out to the outside. Later on, you can move them up into honey supers or other areas above where they might be filled with honey or left vacant. And then once that happens, you can take them out if you want to do that. I do like cycling out my comb periodically when it gets really dark and black like that, and processing it for the wax. So that's fun. But yeah, just cycle comb out, which I think Bob told you here. Mark says EpiPens last 1 year. It's good to know, because I must have got these in 2015, because they expired in 2016. Maybe I'll have maybe I'll film a jackass stunt with them or something. No, I wouldn't do that. I'm not into going to the hospital. Fairhurst Apiary and Honey Farm says, what if they have brood in them? Well, as time goes on, as you're cycling, this is not a quick process. As they're cycling out to the outside, the brood will eventually hatch. And as the combs get further away from the brood nest, they will be filled with honey or left vacant. So that won't be a problem. If you move too many combs around, you'll split up the brood nest and cause problems with keeping the brood nest air conditioned. So don't do that. Stonerman 2K says, Yellowjackets eat meat and also seem to like root beer. I create Yellowjacket trap out of a soda bottle and bait with a slice of ham or turkey, cider vinegar, and a splash of root beer. That's a good recipe to remember. Yeah, check that out. Bob says he uses queen color codes on his frames. I tried marking the date on my frames, but then I got so many frames that I didn't end up using, and so now they've got dates on them that are just incorrect, so I quit doing that. I generally just go by, if I hold up the hive to the sun, if I can see any light coming through the bottom of the cells, it's still good. If I cannot see any light coming through the bottom of the cells, then I recycle it. That's my rule of thumb. Let's see. Lori says, our solution for Yellowjackets, shopback. Shopback will actually work very well because the suction is so powerful and the velocity of the air is so high that when you suck the Yellowjackets into the vacuum, they will hit that little deflector that's right inside of the nozzle, inside of the canister, and they will splat. So that works. Sure, why not? All right, using a lot of bandwidth up here. My processor load is running at about 60%. I don't know if you can hear my fans on my computer running a little higher than normal. My processor is using 33 watts and is running at 180 degrees. If any of you know anything about processors, you can probably guess what brand of processor I'm running just by the temperature. I could. Because AMD processors run cooler than Intel processors. Just a fact of life. I used to be an AMD person, but I bought this computer and it had all the options that I wanted, and it was an Intel, and so that's what I went with. I've been very happy with it. It's a low mid grade gaming laptop, and it's got big air vents in the back, which I like. So it's good. For the longest time I kept a tower computer, and I thought that that's what I needed so that I had high enough power for, doing video and audio and recording and stuff, and cheaper to upgrade, which they are cheaper to upgrade. But once I switched to a laptop, and so now I can take my entire computer and everything, all of my data and all of my video, and I can edit and post and do all that stuff from anywhere in the world. I don't think I'll ever go back to having a tower. The laptop just works too well. Let's see. Thomas LeConte says hello. Hello, Thomas. Trish says, hey. Hi, Trish. How you doing? You just get home from work? Trish lives in Northern California here. She's one of my local beekeeping people. Lori says, or they just stay in there and eat each other if you wait a week to open it. That's an option also. I mean, I've never done it that way. I've been wanting to get a good shot back for a long time, but I just never have. Beats poison. It does beat poison. Poison is poison. So think about that. It's one of the reasons why we're all treatment-free beekeepers, is because poison. It's still a pesticide. And it's a really nasty chemical. It still kills people every year. Frank asks, how long are you going to be on, and are you going to be doing this weekly? I'm going to be on for about another... Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can anybody hear me now? Let's see. OBS. OBS says I have audio. Do we have audio? Okay, we have audio and back. Okay, something happened. I think there's a bad connection. I have an adapter running into my laptop. Maybe that happened. Something. Anyway, I'm back. Nice. Everybody said that on YouTube also. Does anybody have any other questions? I was kind of hoping that I'd get some more hostile questions since I scheduled this like 24 hours ahead of time, but none yet. So it looks like we've got about 16 viewers on Facebook, and we've got about 10 viewers on YouTube. So that's good. That's better than last time. Great. Stonerman says, how many hives do you have right now? I have about 24 right now. That's my sort of stable population. I purposely am staying a backyard hobbyist type beekeeper because those are the type of people, the type of education that I want to do. I think that a lot of beekeeping education that's done now is done from a commercial point of view. And I say that if you're not a commercial beekeeper, then you shouldn't keep bees like one, because you backyard beekeepers and commercial beekeepers have totally different goals in your beekeeping experience. So here we like to have more fun and make less money, I guess. Mimi says, when is your book coming out? I don't know. I'm if any of you are familiar with the Enneagram personality system, I'm a Enneagram 5, a person who is seeks knowledge a lot, who can often be a know-it-all, who finds security in knowledge. But number 5s often are not disciplined enough to write books, and when they do write books, their books are often boring. So I have struggled, especially with my videos, to make them not boring. I am when I sit down and talk like this, I get concerned that I'm boring, because sometimes I don't even want to listen to me. I hope that I throw in enough good information and maybe a joke or two once in a while so that you don't get bored. I'm doing my best, but hey, I'm working with 25 viewers. What can I say? If I was if I was more entertaining, I would have more viewers, right? But I'm okay with it. Stonerman2K asks, oh, by the way, if you want me to use a different name than your screen name, just tell me what your name is and I'll use that name. Do you use a swarm lure? I do use a swarm lure. I have used swarm lures that you can buy from Main Lake in the past. They cost about $2.50 each. Currently, what I do is I take a paper towel and I fold it in half and I stick it in a sandwich bag and I drip about 10 drops of lemongrass essential oil in there. Then I zip it up and I put that in the hive. And the lemongrass oil will slowly diffuse through the plastic, and it works as a good swarm lure. He also says, assuming it's a he, because he says man, are boxes with holes or cracks less attractive for swarms? If they have too many holes or cracks, yes. They want a certain number of holes and cracks. Cracks they're not so worried about because they can fill up cracks no problem. But you generally want a hole that's about 2 square inches. So that's, if it's a round hole, that's going to be about 1.5 inches diameter. But it can also be a slot or something else. That's the optimum is 2 inches, 2 square inches. John asks, do you treat with so-called soft treatments? I do not. I am one of the most hardcore treatment-free beekeepers you will meet. I don't use anything at all. Hard, soft, or limp. Let's see. Where were we back to on Facebook? Oh, Frank said he didn't hear my answer. What did you ask, Frank? Frank asked, how long are you going to be on here, and are you doing this weekly? I'm going to try and do it weekly, unless I have other appointments, but I will generally try to do it weekly. I think Monday is a good evening when a lot of people are home. So yeah, I'm going to try. I'll probably schedule it about 24 hours ahead of time. If I schedule it, I will be here. If I don't schedule it, I might be here. So if I schedule it, if you see an event notification on the Facebook group, I will be here. And yeah, Thomas LeConte said, "Where are you?" I'm in Medford, Oregon, about 25 miles north of the California border. Lori says, "How about even though I am inquisitive and not challenging, some people will not hang with me because I am treatment-free." Yeah, that is true. You're going to find people in the beekeeping community these days that will not hang out with you because you're treatment-free. They think there's something wrong with you. They think that you're being cruel to your bees. They think that you are causing disease problems for their bees. Yes, you're gonna find that. So try to hang out with more open-minded people. Just in general, it's always a good plan, especially in beekeeping. Remember, beekeepers tend to be, I don't know, they're often people who are set in their ways. They are often people who think they are right at all costs. So just keep that in mind. I tend to think of beekeepers as people who are out in the field working by themselves and really just have their own thoughts going through their head most of the time. So, and I'm not saying I'm not one of those. I definitely am. Aurora says, "What type of hives do you use?" I use Langstroth hives with I make my bottoms and tops, so I don't make the typical bottoms and tops like you can buy from the store. I make my own style. The bottoms can be either just a piece of plywood with a rim around them to form an entrance, or I also use some shims with just a flat bottom with a migratory style cover upside down as a bottom. And then lately I've switched my lids to using a feed bag and then a 2-inch layer of foam board, extruded polystyrene foam board, and then some sort of top on top of that, like a telescoping cover, just to keep the foam board from getting sun bleached. Lori says, "You are super calm, which is a plus for bees." Yeah, sure. Okay. I am a pretty sedate dude. I don't get wild and crazy very much. Frank asks, "What is the configuration on your hives?" I run 2 deeps, then my honey supers. Do you keep adding supers on top, or do you place a new one under the next super? My general configuration is I use either deeps or mediums, but because I want to switch to mediums in the long term. But I have been, because people do like deep nucs, I have been keeping some deeps on my hives. Most of my hives are still in deeps. So I guess on average, my hives right now are 1 deep and then mediums going up from there. And I don't use a queen excluder or anything to differentiate my hive bodies from supers, so that's really the bee's choice on that one. Thomas LeConte, "Do you lose a lot of hives?" I don't think that I lose a lot of hives. I've stayed under the national average loss rate most years, my entire beekeeping career. I generally lose between 4 to 20% per year. This last year, I think I lost 15, 18%. I don't keep that good a track of numbers anymore, so it's not a big deal. My loss rates are not a big concern for me. My theory is that I lose all the hives that I need to. I lose all the weakest hives, and that's good enough for me. Lori asks, "We have a friend who bought an old farmhouse. In the garage wall is a majorly strong hive, coming and going, lots of forage, mostly blackberries. At some point, she's going to have the garage redone. I hate to move these bees because they feel rooted to that place. They are obviously super strong and robust. I don't know if she wants bees and hives on site, but if she's going to wreck the garage, they need to be moved. When do we have to make this decision? Again, maritime, Puget Sound, temperate weather, and warm through September. I would say through September is when you're going to want to make that decision. Your area is pretty mild weather, but optimally you don't want to do a cutout in the winter. I'm not a cutout expert. I've never done a cutout other than from my own hives that were all messed up. But yeah, definitely post on the Facebook group about that one, because there are a lot of people who do cutouts both for fun and for profit. They give you some really good advice on that. Thomas says, doesn't plywood hold moisture? It does when it starts to hold moisture, yes. Not initially, but as it gets older, as it ages, it will hold moisture. I don't like to use plywood. I do use plywood nucs, and I use plywood on my bottom boards a little bit. I haven't had any of it rot yet, but the nucs are only outside in the summer when it doesn't rain here. I'm doing some experiments with high density overlay plywood, which is some super heavy duty plywood. It's about 1.25 inches thick, and it's the stuff that they use for like road signs. Not road signs, because that's aluminum, but they used to use for road signs. They still use for some signs. It's overlaid with a layer of, I'm not sure. Look up high density overlay. Anyway, and that stuff seems to hold up really good, even unpainted. Anita says, I've found Yellowjacket numbers escalating. They drag off the discarded, but I'm worried about my hive. Should I worry? You should never worry about anything. That's my #1 rule. You can be concerned, but you should never make decisions based on fear or worry, because worry cannot change anything. If you are concerned about danger to your hives, you can reduce the size of the entrance so that the bees have less space to guard. If you know where there's a nearby Yellowjacket nest, you can go kill it. But don't worry. Worry's not gonna help you in your beekeeping experience. Paul says, I live in North Carolina in farming country, lots of soy, cotton, wheat, and corn. The local honey industry calls their honey fairly organic. I try to stress as much as I can that it's not so, but they believe it to be that way and sell it locally. What's your feelings on that? When I started beekeeping, there was actually what we did, we called organic beekeeping, and Dee Lesby still calls hers more or less organic beekeeping. But right about that time, 2003, 2004-ish, the word organic was started to become legally defined, so that now you can buy anywhere, Walmart, wherever, you can buy organic certified stuff. I suppose you can call your stuff organic, but it will never be organic certified. It'll never be certified organic. It'll never be like truly organic, like actually organic, because that's virtually impossible with honey, because you have to be able to certify that there are no pesticides within, I forget what the number is, but like 2 miles of your hive. And that's just not something that the vast majority of us that's even possible. It's just not going to happen. So I use treatment free, and I try to explain to people why using the term treatment free is important. And of course, give samples of honey and stuff. And your honey is always going to be better than what's available from the store. So sell your product for as much as you can get out of it, and make it a good product. And that's good enough for me. All right, back to YouTube. Let's see. John asks, do you feed? I only feed in certain situations, which you can go back earlier in the video and hear about. but not as a matter of standard practice. Feeding is for like tiny swarms and first year hives. As far as overwintering mature hives, no feeding. If they can't get enough honey to survive the winter on their own, that's their problem. Stonerman says, is a brood break considered a treatment? I consider a brood break a treatment because it's something that you're doing specifically in the hive to help with a disease problem. And it's my view that the bees should be dealing with their own disease problems. Whatever their problem is, they should be dealing with it. I'm just going to be the beekeeper and manage them for honey production and other stuff. It's their job to overcome the disease issues through adaptation and natural selection. Thanks for doing this. You are welcome. Bob says, how do you extract, process, and store your honey? Generally the same way that everybody else does. I just use an uncapping knife. I've got a small radial extractor. I have a Manlake 918 frame radial extractor. Extract it in the usual way. Process, it just runs through a sieve. I think, again, another Manlake sieve, whatever it is, their normal plastic sieve things. It's fit in buckets. And then I store it generally in pint and quart jars. So it comes good at honey processing season. I go buy a big old stack of, well, sometimes if I find a good deal during the year, I'll buy a stack of canning jars and then save them for later. And then I sell those from there or store them. I have done squeeze bottles in the past, but the problem with squeeze bottles is once you get it in the bottle, it's going to crystallize eventually, and the squeeze bottles don't hold up to heat like the canning jars do, and so you can't reliquefy it without totally warping the bottle, which makes them ugly. Okay, everybody's saying thank you, so I guess that's coming to the end of my time. It is coming to the end of my time. Bob says, here in Belgium, we stir the honey to make it more creamy texture. Yes, some people are into creamy, what do they call it here? Spun honey? Whipped honey? Yeah, some people are into that. I've never really gotten really into that. I just, most honey I eat either goes into coffee or tea or Cheerios, sometimes baking. Or, and on rolls too. It's really good on rolls. Yeah. All right, well, let's see. I've got 2 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions in 2 minutes? Thank you all for joining me. Bob says, bacon. Do you have honey on bacon? Bacon's good. Bacon is a sometimes food. You're welcome, all of you. Thanks for joining me. We've got about 30 people on right now. That's good. We've got 9 thumbs up on YouTube. That's good. Enjoy yourselves. Have fun keeping bees. Because if you're not having fun, you probably should find another hobby. I will see you all next time, probably next Monday night. If you have any suggestions of any other times you want me to do this, just leave me a comment and I will consider doing it at other times too. So thank you all. I will see you all next time.